There's a man standing on the sidewalk and he sees someone approaching with an old dog. The dog looks friendly, with gray hair around his mouth and eyes. He has the look of age on him. The man asks the dog owner for permission to pet him, and the dog owner says no, warning he is likely to bite. But the man loves dogs, and instinctively he knows that all dogs can recognize a dog lover. The man reaches for the dog, and instantly the dog growls, snaps, and delivers a series of vicious bites. The dog owner backs away, frantically pulling on the leash as he shouts, "I told you so." In 2022, Fred Woods made his 18th attempt at persuading a parole board that he should be granted freedom. He was in his 70s. He had been in prison for 46 years. He has a calm demeanor and he looks like someone's grandfather. But Governor Newsom and his team of criminal justice experts opposed parole, insisting this old dog will bite again. The Madera County prosecutor echoes the governor's concerns. She tells the members of the board that her staff, the governor's people, and the prison authorities, all experts, believe that if this 70-something man were ever released, he would kidnap again. The survivors of the Chowchilla kidnapping made their biennial sojourn to beg that Woods not be paroled because they know who he is, and they know the great joy he feels when he prepares his special recipe. All these many people, experts and victims, accomplished at the hearing was to name the crime. They did not describe the criminal. The only thing the parole board saw was a quiet man in his 70s. The parole board should have been told about Fred Woods' secret recipe. They should have been told about Beelzebub stew. Fred Woods wrote, quote, "I am Beelzebub," in the 1976 ransom note recovered by the police. He most certainly knew about the spicy southwestern concoction called Beelzebub stew. Here's Fred's own secret recipe for Beelzebub stew. First, you find a large, sealable container, large enough to hold 1 to 13 people. A Dodge van will do nicely. It's kind of like turning an old oil can into a barbecue grill. For some reason unfathomable by the police, Fred Woods kept his stew container stored in Tehachapi, California, to be used upon his eventual release. The next step in his recipe is to capture people and enclose them in the van. Of course, Fred removes the outer clothing first. While these people are stewing in complete darkness, Fred takes off driving down the road. The recipe calls for 11 hours of driving. The first ingredient comes quickly. Within minutes, the tears start. They seep into the undergarments, creating a salty aroma. Next comes the sweat, completely soaking the clothing and dripping down the foreheads. At this point, usually within 5 or 10 miles, the blood is added, though the blood could actually be the first ingredient with a swift slap across the face. If prepared the proper way, blood is added through the process of abrupt stopping, quick acceleration, sharp turns, opportune encounters with potholes, and the knocking together of knees with elbows. It is essential that the people are tossed and turned and slammed into each other in total darkness so that the vomiting will start. Of course, once one person does it, Everyone else will contribute to the recipe. It usually takes 3 hours for the urine, sometimes sooner, sometimes later. And of course the pooping will eventually be added to the mix. The recipe calls for mixing these ingredients for 11 hours, no more, no less. That's how he did it with the children, divided into 2 vans so he could make 2 batches. If he took Nancy and drove the 9.5 hours to his fortress in Nipomo, he would have had to drive aimlessly for another hour and a half to get the recipe right. Tears, sweat, blood, vomit, and poop. Whether it's 26 children or 1 old lady, the recipe still calls for 11 hours of driving. Fred said in his first note that he was 11 hours away from Tucson. That Fred Woods prepared his Beelzebub stew in 1976 is undeniable. That his victims and the whole California criminal justice system believes he is still capable in his 70s of preparing this stew again is also without question. It is not difficult to visualize how he went about kidnapping Nancy Guthrie. The police determined Woods spent 18 months preparing for the Chowchilla kidnapping. He had the same amount of time for Nancy. Woods was released on parole in August of 2022 and required to live in a house he owned in Victorville, California, just a 6-hour drive from Tucson and a 1-hour drive to Tehachapi so he could get his Dodge van. Woods was released from parole in late August 2025, freeing him from all unannounced inspections and control by the California authorities. Sometime after his release from parole, Woods went to one of the 2 Walmarts in Victorville and purchased the backpack, balaclava, black gloves, gun holster, and an oversized peace sign belt buckle so he could again assume the identity of Beelzebub. 5 months after being released from parole, Woods drove down Interstate 10, leaving his house at 8 p.m. and arriving at Nancy's home at 2 a.m. Woods approached Nancy's door and with his devilish sense of humor left a clever clue no one would catch. He grabbed a handful of foliage. You know, the stuff you see in the woods, and showed it to the camera. Woods knocked on the door, and when Nancy asked who it was, Woods, in his calm, friendly, old man voice, answered. Nancy, a trusting, sleepy woman, accustomed to seeing ICE agents dressed in similar outfits, opened the door. Only when Nancy resisted Woods' instruction to get into the back of his van did it become necessary to smack her to force compliance. After walking her to the van and locking her in complete darkness, Woods entered the house, and he noted conditions he would later use to prove his bona fides. If Woods wanted to have a rest stop before making the 9.5-hour drive to his fortress in Nipomo, he could be back in Victorville by 8 a.m. Now, one way to prove or disprove this theory is to check the 2 Walmarts in Victorville and the 3 Nipomo area ones for purchases of the backpack, baklava, etc. Anyone can do that, but the Bureau of Incompetence doesn't want to. It reminds me of the time that Kash Patel went to Hegseth's house to watch the film of the many Caribbean murders that Hegseth ordered. After a beer bathroom break, Kash realized he had lost his keys and was searching for them in Hegseth's living room. When Hegseth asked why he wasn't looking in the rec room where they had watched the film, Kash Patel responded by saying the light was better in the living room.